Oh, good Lord. It's unbelievable. It's horrible.
Found footage movies are largely associated with horror films, but really it's a genre unto itself. I'm sure we're all familiar with faux documentaries, or mockumentaries if you will, where a film looks like a documentary but is actually fiction. Well, a found footage movie would be like one of the cameras used to film a mockumentary was discovered and the footage was recovered and then presented to the audience unedited.
A pretty important part of the movie that there is that very fine line between fiction and reality,
right.
And that we all wanted to preserve that because we all wanted to see the movie do well. And I think that's part of what makes it interesting even now to come out and have people say, oh my God, you're alive. You know,
Right.
That sort of adds a nice element to it rather than people always knowing from the very beginning it's a hoax. It's, you know.
It's hard to say what film started the trend, but it's often attributed to Cannibal Holocaust.
It's a brutal movie. It's really a brutal movie, and it's not for the faint of heart. And people who think that they've been shocked by everything are not necessarily ready for this, no matter what they've heard.
This film is about a group of documentary filmmakers who venture off into the jungle to film the tribespeople, and then they go missing. So a rescue team is sent out to find them and they recover their footage, which shows that rather than being passive flies on the wall, these filmmakers were provocateurs, staging much of what they shot for shock value. And then they are murdered by the very people they were exploiting for clout.
You know, like any good movie, Ruggiero has the underdog win by virtue of their innate power instead of having, some extra hardware.
A lot has been made about the genuine acts of animal cruelty, including by myself in this video. But I don't want to retread that ground, so instead I want to talk about the form. Because a lot of people have either misremembered this movie or haven't seen it at all. Because the footage taken from the characters' cameras is not presented to the audience as real, but presented to the characters within the film as real, as a lot of this film is shot conventionally.
You must admit it's exceptional footage. I didn't expect such impact, such authenticity.
I don't know. I don't think exceptional is the right word.
You don't?
What lives in people's memories is the gore, but the central theme of the film comes from the characters reacting to the footage and the immoral actions of the film crew within it.
This so-called documentary footage is offensive, it is dishonest, and above all, it is inhuman.
By contrast, the McPherson Tape has no moral standing at all. Not because it's depraved, but because it is presented to its audience as a simple home movie of a birthday party.
Holy shit. It's a spaceship, Mike.
Oh yeah, and there's an alien invasion as well.
So what I set out to do was to hopefully replicate what it's like. The way that they're abducted, the designs of the aliens and the ships, show exactly what it's like for a family to be abducted. All the designs for the aliens and the ships were taken from drawings that people made who claim to have been abducted. So rather than do a dramatic piece and make it look really slick, I want to make it look as real as possible. So the video starts out looking like it's a home video for a child's... am I talking too fast?
The original title for this movie was UFO Abduction, and it had a very small release. But it gained notoriety on VHS, where bootlegs were passed around under the pretense of being real. And somewhere in amongst the illegal distribution racket, it picked up the title The McPherson Tape, and that stuck.
My goal was to set out to make the most realistic UFO abduction tape possible, but this was beyond my wildest dreams. It was a huge compliment to the cast and crew that people, UFOologist, scientist, and a colonel with military experience believed that this was an actual tape, an actual documentation of someone being abducted. It cracked me up. I couldn't believe it.
But truth is in the eye of the beholder, and even though Dean Alioto confessed, Tom Dongo has his doubts.
There's really something inside me that really is not convinced that parts of it are not real. I have a feeling that still that parts of that video may be 100% authentic.
It goes to show if someone is really convinced, no amount of evidence will shake that. But that's his problem. This film, though not a giant hit, really sets up the template for found footage movies, where the mundane turns into the extraordinary. It even has the genre trope of the camera falling to the floor at the end, with the implication of something monstrous happening off screen. I have no evidence that the two filmmakers who made the Blair Witch Project saw this film, but they both hit the same story beats. If you are of a similar age to me, then you will recall the Blair Witch Project being released, as it caused quite a stir. Shot for approximately $60,000 USD, it grossed over 200 million worldwide. It sees a group of filmmakers venture out into the woods to film a documentary about the legend of the Blair Witch. They get lost, all turn on each other, and then it goes to hell in a handcart.
What they did is they brought the three of us actors, Michael Williams, Joshua Leonard, and myself, to Maryland. We had a few days that were sort of a crash course in film school. I was shown documentaries that were sort of on creepy topics as well, so that I could sort of get a sense of what I wanted my character's documentary to look like.
Okay.
We also learned how to use the 16mm film camera. Mike learned how to run the DAT recorder. And after a couple of days of that, we were sent out to start making this documentary about the Blair Witch. And it was supposed to be, 3 days of footage, but then things happen and we're never heard from again.
Right.
Unlike Cannibal Holocaust, this footage is presented to the audience as real, and the improvised nature of the dialogue does a lot to cement that. But one thing is very clear, these people are not filmmakers. Being trained on and having practiced with cameras instills a muscle memory where framing a camera shot is second nature, in the same way that a practiced musician can't bash at a piano's keys without sounding a little bit like a tune. Anyone watching this footage, which is presented to the audience as though it were straight from their cameras, would see that this would not edit into a watchable film. No camera person would intentionally frame a shot like this.
I am so sorry.
That being said, I am aware that this is the most iconic image from the movie, but that doesn't mean it isn't poorly framed. In fact, the camera whips around so much that a lot of people complained that it was giving them eye strain when viewed on a big screen. And ultimately, the film's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. It works because it feels like watching someone's home movie. But watching someone's home movie is rarely fun for anyone not in them.
Ed and I both, try to do something different with a genre that we felt was kind of, maybe getting a little old over time.
We started talking about horror films and what kind of films scared us when we were little kids, and we had kind of the same horror films, The Shining and The Exorcist.
So we felt Blair was in that same spirit, something that was a psychological horror, which we feel is much scarier than, just getting a knife in the neck or something like that.
What bugs me out is that we're so damn deep in the woods, and people are going to try and come out here and mess with us, then they got to have something wrong with them, and I'm not going to play with that.
But how do we know it was people?
Well, even if it wasn't, I'm not going to play with that either.
This film added new life to the then rather stale horror genre. It was followed by a sequel which wasn't found footage, and also wasn't very good. Then in 2016 it was given a soft reboot, which is much more of a spiritual successor to the first film. But I tried to watch it, got very bored, and then turned it off after an hour.
Most first-time directors, when they make their first movie, it's generally a rom-com or, something where you can shoot fairly easily. You went, I'm going to make a superhero movie, I'm going to do it on a certain budget, I can go for it. What was going through your mind when you said that? I mean, it seems like a massive project to take on for a first-time movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, it kind of seemed like, it's either this or nothing. Like when the idea, was fleshed out to a point before I had even run into Max, I knew there was something there that I had to make it my, the biggest, challenge of my life, and that there was a certain style that I wanted to work, and that there was certain math behind it, and that it would only be through a movie like this that embraced something that is usually considered a sacrilege from a cinephile's standpoint of doing a POV film, and making it sort of big and deep and like a movie.
Yeah.
That if I could do that, if I could take on that challenge and make a movie like that and make it work, that it would be something really, really special. So I had to put my whole life into it.
Chronicle was about 3 teenagers who gain telekinetic powers. For a while they bond over these new abilities, which are documented on home video for their own record, before things spiral out of control and one of the trio essentially becomes super villain.
I'm a little bit tired of the found footage movie. Never really feels real to me. Never really seems to click for whatever reason. It really adds to this film. It works perfectly for this film. Why do you guys think that the found footage format works so well in a film like Chronicle?
I think that the camera in Chronicle is used in a way that's different in a lot of found footage movies. I feel like a lot of found footage movies use it as a gimmick, and I feel like that we use it as a way to drive the story forward and to tell the story and to not only let the audience feel like they are another character in the movie, but to perceive also through another character's eyes or point of view. I feel like it really informs the audience and drives the story forward much more than in other we just happen to be filming kind of movie.
I make no secret about it, but with very few exceptions, I don't like superhero movies. Chronicle is one of those exceptions, as it explores a world which I believe is quite close to what would actually happen if a bunch of kids got magic powers. They would make YouTube videos showing them off, they would play pranks, and then power would go to their heads. It's inventive and played very low key, so it never really strikes you as strange.
This is like looking through a soda straw, and that's what you see, so that the scale of the movie could be huge, but that because what you were seeing was just through here, it didn't necessitate getting the shot of what was over there or over there.
It enabled us to sort of play peekaboo with the monster. You just want to reveal the monster in the first act or second act.
Cloverfield is essentially a Godzilla movie, but told from the ground level. I personally find it rather unremarkable and devoid of the tension that the far superior sequel has, 10 Cloverfield Lane, but that is not a found footage movie, so a story for a different video. The only thing I found genuinely inventive about Cloverfield is the fact that it's meant to be shot on a used tape, so when the footage drops out, it cuts to what was filmed previously, acting as flashbacks without breaking the point of view format.
But there's these great moments in the middle of the action where all of a sudden we have a flashback. Logically, there's been some sort of like mishap with the tape where it fast forwards a bit before it starts recording again. So you have these little inserts of what's being recorded over on the tape.
This is one of those films I sit through but can only see the meetings which led to its creation. Let's make a monster movie in the style of Blair Witch. That'll turn a tidy profit. And I'm sure it did, but it's not a film I have any love for.
I think that Shelby Oaks, it deserves... It kind of does deserve the critical panning that it's received. And again, I say that as someone who finds it very inspirational that Chris Stuckman was able to make a movie on that level.
Chris Stuckman is a movie YouTuber who has been regularly uploading to his channel for over 10 years. Shelby Oaks is his first feature film as director, and the most recent movie to be featured in this video.
Using a found footage format to introduce and set up the backstory leading up to the events of the film, and then transitioning to a more traditional narrative was an interesting idea. However, with all that said, Shelby Oaks does fall very short of being worth seeing, and the biggest reason for that is its script. If you've seen Stuckman's previous work as a writer, his short films Auditorium 6 and Notes from Melanie, then you already know that his writing is just not very good.
I must confess that I have not watched this movie as yet. I did purchase a copy when it was released in the UK just before Christmas 2025, but life's been so crazy since then I've not had a chance to view it. Maybe I would have found time where the buzz not so negative. Chris Stuckman is like me. He is a movie nerd who is following a dream. As a result, I feel we're on the same team and I really want this film to be good. So I'm going to hold off viewing it until I can watch it as neutrally as possible. I only mention it here so I don't have to mention it in the comments below.
If you're new to our channel, we're also filmmakers ourselves. If you go through our channel, we have filmmakers in air quotes. We're not, we make shitty little movies. We're looking at any YouTuber movie project like this as a person that's doing what we want to do. So Chris Stuckman succeeding is beneficial for us. We said this in our Critical Drinker video as well. Anybody that makes the jump from YouTuber to professional filmmaker is a net win for us.
And I do think that 10 or 15 years from now, the vast majority of new filmmakers will have some kind of YouTube presence or TikTok presence, or I just find it really hard to imagine that new filmmakers in 10 or 15 years will just appear out of nowhere having never posted anything on the internet.
A lot of new filmmakers make found footage movies because there's no pressure for it to look good. In fact, it's almost a badge of honour to have it look so bad. But the fact it's easy to make is not a good enough reason to use the format. Many people find it to be something of an obstacle to get over, which can prevent them from enjoying the film.
A lot of these found footage films have one of the shittiest stories you could ever imagine, but they're just like, well, fuck it, let's make it a movie anyway. We'll just make it found footage and somehow it'll work. People will buy into it. So in other words, found footage horror films are usually just a way for people to get around a really shitty story and just hope it works on film.
I am making my own movie at the moment. It is neither found footage or a horror film, but if you would like to help support that, you can send me a one-time donation via this site. And be sure to leave me a comment below and tell me what found footage films I've missed off this list. Extra points if they're not horror films. I'm Scott Kingsnorth, and I'm making a movie.